Hi there, my name's Gavin Taylor and welcome to the channel. This is going to be part 2 of my Music Theory 101 tutorial. So the first part was just looking at the major scale and just our understanding, our comprehension of the major scale. In this part we're going to be looking at application. The very basic first point is just to lay that scale out on some instruments. Primarily we're going to do this on some fretted instruments, the bass, the guitar, mandolin, tenor banjo. So there's 2 groups of instruments and we'll look at the tuning of those and how we can learn that from the scale. So, hope you enjoy.
So, first job we're going to do is change the lighting outside. Sorry, we've had to shoot this in the evening. First job we're going to do is map out our major scale on a fretboard. Okay, and this is going to be the same process, irrelevant of which fretboard you've got, whether you're dealing with a banjo, a dobro, a mandolin, a guitar, anything. It's the same process that we're going to use here. Okay, so I'm going to start off with the bass purely because it's got the least strings, so it's got the least amount of complexity to visualize. Maybe the mandolin's only got 4 strings, so maybe I'll do that one next. So I'll start with that. So the first thing we're going to need here is our blank bit of paper. And we're going to draw a fretboard diagram. Some of you may have obviously encountered those already. They're useful in a variety of ways. Here's some ones I was using in some lessons earlier. Here's some horizontal fretboard diagrams with intervals relative to chord structures on them. So they can be very complex. There's a diminished use over dominant and diminished chords. So they're flexible things for simple diagrammatic information or complex information. In this case, we're applying scale information to them. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do a bass. I'm going to do one sheet for each, so that it's each of these, so that it's a really nice big thing. So at the top, this is for the bass. Excuse the writing. Don't want to get too distracted by that. I tend to. Ever since I was young, just redo the titles again and again. Anyway, bass. So we want 4 nice big clear strings, evenly spaced, right down through the middle of the page. Now you could do these smaller, obviously, but for the purposes of this video and the camera, it makes sense for me to do it very large, so it can't be confused. Okay, not very even. Okay, up the top here, we're going to draw a thick double line, and I'm going to shade that in. Now most of you familiar with these will know what that means, but that's the nut. That's the little top of the fretboard here. If you just look behind me here, sorry I can't really point that out easily. On the guitar, here's an image of a guitar, an arrow to the nut, or whichever frame I can find it around me. But that's the bit we're talking about. Okay, after that, depending on the instrument, we're going to need a variety of different frets for this. For the bass and the guitar, we're only going to need like 5 frets. So I'm going to draw one across here. That's the first fret wire. And we can do these equidistant. They don't need to be bunched up like they are on the actual instrument. Just as long as we can clearly identify information between them. You can fill up as much information as you want since we've got the whole page there. But really we only need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I've done an extra one. Okay, the next bit that's really useful to start with is to map in the information you know. And most of the time people have a lot more residual information about an instrument in their head than they might immediately think. The first thing that you should, or hopefully know, is the names of the strings. Okay, so for the bass we've got a low E. Now low being low in sound, not low to the ground or any other definition, but yeah, a low sound, so that's the big fat one closest to your chin. The next one is A, and the next one is D, and finally our G string. Now if you've got an extra one, if you've got a 5-string bass with a B, just map in an extra string, do 5 strings, put the information in that you do know. Okay, so from there, we're going to apply what we know from the C major scale. Okay, that's our tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. That relates to the C major scale, doesn't it? C to D is a tone, D to E is a tone, E to F semitone, F to G a tone, G to A tone, A to B is a tone, and B to C is our final semitone. 2 tones and a semitone, 3 tones and a semitone. If you're remotely unclear with that, revise the first lesson in this series. Okay, so what we should tell there is the first bit of information we're going to start with is on the lowest string and we're going to get high. We could start anywhere and just randomly map in, but for this process I'd like you to follow me on the lowest point, and we'll map in the notes on this string and then the A string and further up. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is look at this E, and what would then be the next note? Well, F's the next note. I'll give you a moment to think. E to F is a semitone. So that's the smallest kind of motion we can make. That's 1 fret on the instrument. So from the open string to the first fret would be 1 fret. Sometimes on an instrument that's fretted with the hands, and when you can kind of negate thinking about the open strings because you're not having to fret them. I'll see it quite a lot. People will be thinking about their fingers and then they'll miss open strings. So remember, an open string is the note we're starting from in this case, and we're stepping up 1 semitone to F. Okay. Now notice the instrument didn't start here on C. It didn't offer us that. None of the open strings are C. So we're just going to use the pattern that we know and map it all in, and then we can start playing the C major scale to get the right sound. So we're playing from C. We're not starting on any funny what they call modes where you're starting the C scale from somewhere else. Okay, so from F to G, it's a tone. So that's 2 frets because it's 2 semitones. So 2 frets up. So here's our F. Sorry, left-handed with this shade's not great. Here's our F. That would be 1 fret. Okay, a semitone. We need 2 semitones to make a tone, so that takes us here to G. Now notice I'm dissecting the line there, the string, where we'd put our fingers, not across the fret wire, but where you'd put your fingers. That seems to make most sense to me. Okay, so the next problem here is, well, not the next problem, but the thing that we're about to approach is the next note. And this is a critical part of this process that makes it universal to every instrument. Okay, so first of all, we're at G. How far is it to A? G to A is a tone. So that's 2 frets. So a semitone upward here would be there. So we need 2 semitones to make a tone. That takes us to here to A. So I'm going to map that in. Now the observant of you will notice that we've already got an A here. The next string is also called A. And it happens to be the same A as this. So you might see this on various sites and books. I'm going to put that A in a box to distinguish it from the other ones. Okay? This A, I'm going to put a very small, sparse, dotted line between them. That's the same pitch. Okay? If you place your finger on that 5th fret and play the next string, if you play this note and then the next string, you'll find it's the same pitch. Okay, so this also tells us an interval relationship. This tells us about the tuning of these notes. We can also do it with our hand. E, F, G, A. It's some kind of fourth. Now you get different measurements of fourths, perfect fourths or augmented fourths. So in this case, we've got a classical fourth, which is a perfect fourth, 2.5 tones. We've got a half tone to start with, E to F, and then 2 tones from F to G and G to A. So that's 2.5 in total, and that's what we call a perfect fourth. But we're not dealing with intervals here, but diagrammatically you'll see this pattern moving on again. Okay, so when we play up through strings, we don't necessarily have to play this note because we would play here and then move on. If we're playing those notes, we'd move on to the next string. And we'll see that on this next couple of strings more critically for our exercise of playing the C scale. Okay, so now we're on this A. Remember, not this A, this one. This one is just for the sake of the diagram so we can see what I call the transition point. The point where the note is on one string becomes the same as the next open string. Okay, so a transition point. The point where the note on one string becomes the same note as the next open string. I'm sure there's a less wordy way to say it, but that's what I'm saying. Okay, so we're on to the A string. So A to B. A to B is a tone again. Okay, so it's 2 frets from the open string. This would be 1 fret, and we need 2 frets. Okay, so B is here. Okay, so B to C, that's a semitone. E to F and B to C are where the semitones come in. So that's just 1 fret, that goes there. Okay, C to D, it's a tone, 2 frets. Here's 1 fret, here's 2 frets. So I'm going to map that in. And lo and behold, we're back at the same point again. It's the same distance here. Notice our A took us to the 5th fret, and that was our transition point. Here we're on the D string, on the A string, but we get up to D at the 5th fret, and that's the same as the next string. Again, I'm going to put that in a box. We're not directly going to play that yet in this position, in this open position when we're playing with the open strings. We will be playing this one. So I'm going to just put a dotted line again, quite sparse so that we don't clutter up the diagram too much. Okay, so it's the next step, D to E. D to E is a tone, so that's 2 frets. Okay, we've now done a whole octave because we started on E and we finished on E. Well, not finished yet, but we're on E now. So we're going to carry on a little bit further. E to F, we've done that once before, that's a semitone, 1 fret. And F to G, we can see that here now. We can start to map visually what we've already done on some instances. So here's F to G, it's a tone, 2 frets, so G becomes here. And you guessed it, on this tuning system for the bass, it's consistent. This in a box, because it's the same as this next string. It's a transition point. Okay, so that gives us D, E, F on this string, and G is a transition point. We'd play the next one. Okay, and here we're going to go all the way up to C for the purposes of this diagram. For the register playing the C scale on the bass, we're going to need to go a little bit higher. We'll play a little higher, but you'll see. So G to A. Now here's an interesting thing. Look below, we can see G to A here. But it's quite hard to measure them directly here because they're on separate strings. That's also the value of mapping them out here, is that I've already got this relationship clearly on 1 string where it can be measured. Sometimes visualizing the relationships between 2 strings can be difficult if you haven't learned the relationships clearly yet. So it's a tone. So we go up 2 frets, the same as we saw here, G to A. Okay, and then we're going to go A to B, and we can see that here. That's a tone. And finally, and guessed it, B to C, semitone. We can see that here before. Okay, so there is our bass laid out with all the notes from the C scale. What we'll be doing is playing from this middle C here, the 3rd fret on the A string, all the way up to this high C on the G string, the 5th fret on there. Okay, so right now we're just going to take a wee pause and we shall jump to the next instrument. Great, so I'm going to fire through a few more of these diagrams. Feel free to pause them as we go, but just for sake of time, I'm just going to carry on through them and not worry too much about going through the process. So you can review this process for your at your leisure. But I'll label each page as I go. Okay, so I'm going to do the mandolin. Names of the strings. And off we go. G to A, the tone. A to B, the tone. B to C, the tone. C to D, the tone. D is the same as the next string. I'm going to put that in a box. This is 1, 2, 2.5, 3.5 tones. That's a perfect 5th. G, A, B, C, D. 5. It's a 5th. happens to be 3.5 tones, G to A tone, A to B a tone, B to C is a semitone, and C to D is a tone. 1, 2, 2.5, 3.5 tones, a perfect fifth. As I say, we're not too interested in the intervals at this point, so I'll carry on. D to E, E to F, F to G, G to A, and that's the same as our next string. A to B, B to C, C to D, D to E, that's our next string. E, that's our transition point. E to F, F to G, G to A to B, and for the hell of it, I'll play C. So there's our mandolin diagram with the C scale. We'd be playing from here to here, or potentially from here to here. We've got 2 octaves we could do, but in the bass we only had 1 register, from this C to this C. Here we've got 2 options. Okay, so moving on. Dobro, 6 strings. These are the sort of things you want to do again and again. The more you make the mental image of it, the clearer it will be with you. If you haven't written enough frets for your given instrument, just do it again. It's only a bit of paper. Okay, so the Dobro tuning that I'm dealing with here is G, B, D, G, B, D. Notice it's a repetition of the same string sets twice. Okay, G to A, tone, A to B, a tone. That's the same as the next string. Okay, B to C is a semitone, C to D is a tone. Put that in the box because that's the same as the next string. Now notice this is vastly different from the mandolin or the banjo. The mandolin or the bass. Here we have a relationship of thirds between G and B. G, A, B. 1, 2, 3, and both of them are tones. So 2 tones, a third. Okay, and then B to D is different again. B to C, C to D. It's still a third. 1, 2, 3, but it's only 1.5 tones. B to C is a semitone. We call that a minor third, but again we'll go on to that. So we're just mapping them out and we'll see what the pattern is we get. So here we've got G, D, D, E, F, G. That's the same as the next string. And that, for those of you observant enough, is the same tuning as we found on the bass. That's tuned in a 4th. Okay. Here we've got, sorry, that's mandolin. Here we've got a D and a G string. D, E, F, G is a transition point. D, E, F, G. G is a transition point. The rest is this duplicated because we've already done this diagram once. We're on a G string, a B string, and a D string. So I'll just copy those over. Okay. So here for our C scale, we'd be going from here to here. Guitar, another 6 strings. See if we can get them straighter. Okay, names of the strings: E, A, D, G, B, E. Okay, E to F, semitone. F to G is a tone. G to A is a tone. What you see is the bottom strings are just like the bass. tuned in a fourth. Okay, next string, A to B, tone, B to C is a semitone, C to D. That's our transition point. Same as the next string. D to E, E to F, F to G. Same as the next string. G to A, tone, A to B, tone, B to C, a semitone. Oh, well, we don't need that, do we, here? So what you'll notice here is that B is the transition point, and the pattern changes on the guitar here. Up until that point, this was the same string names as the bass, but it doesn't continue that way. Here we can see the tuning, we have an anomaly on it. More like the dobro, where this tuning is varied. On the bass and the mandolin, we had the tuning all the same. These transition points were all the same on the bass. We didn't, well, only by virtue of we didn't have an extra string above it. But on the mandolin, it was fifths, and they were all across the 7th fret. Bass, all fourths across at the 5th fret. In this case, we've got one anomaly, which is G to B, which is a third. G, A, B. You saw it on the dobro a moment ago. It's 2 tones. Okay, so we're going to carry up on the B string. B to C is a semitone. C to D is a tone. And D to E is a tone. I'm going to pop that in a box, as that's our transition point. I'll just miss these dots. Just pop them all in. Okay, and I'll finish up with the E string. E, F, semitone. F to G, tone. G to A. Okay, the C scale that we practice in the video that you'll see in a moment is from C to C. Okay, so that's us done all those. We shall swap now to seeing these on the instruments. So that was the C scale laid out on a variety of fretboards instruments, so you can see the idea of the C scale laid out on those instruments. The next video hopes to be one of just very simply playing the C scale. I'll do a little loop station version of that. So look forward to making that. For now, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please click like. Any comments will be gratefully received, and subscribe if you fancy it. Okay, till next time. Thanks for watching.